The frozen existence in the heart of the cold, barren world. There was nothing but endless snow and ice. The wind howled through the empty valleys, carrying with it a biting chill that could freeze a person in seconds. This was no ordinary planet. It was a place where life was nearly impossible, where the temperature dropped so low that even the sturdiest of beings would struggle to survive. Alone in this unforgiving landscape, an alien girl lay on the icy ground, shivering uncontrollably. She had been left behind, abandoned by her people, a casualty of a war that had taken everything from her. Her fur was matted with snow, her breath coming out in short, ragged gasps. Every movement she made sent pain through her fragile body. She was dying. Her name was Aria, and she had known only cold and loneliness for as long as she could remember. She had been born on a distant world, a place where warmth was as rare as kindness. Her people, the Vokari, were fierce and proud. But their pride had led them to make enemies, and now they had no place to call home. Aria had been separated from the others, left to fend for herself in the frozen wastes. No one cared about her fate. As the hours dragged on, her body grew weaker. She could no longer move her limbs, the cold numbing her to the core. Her vision blurred, and the world around her began to spin. She could hear the wind, but it sounded distant, as though it were coming from far away. She was slipping away, and the thought of dying alone in this desolate place was almost too much to bear. Then something changed. A distant sound reached her ears, a soft hum that grew louder with each passing second. Her eyes, heavy with exhaustion, struggled to focus. Through the blur of snow and fog, she saw a shape, a figure moving through the storm. A human. The figure was small against the vastness of the snow-covered world, but it was unmistakably human. He was wearing a thick coat, his breath forming little clouds in the freezing air. Aria wanted to call out to him, but her voice failed her. All she could do was watch as the human approached, each step slow and deliberate as he fought against the wind. Her heart, once cold and empty, began to beat faster. She didn't know who this person was or why he was here, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt something stir inside her. A tiny spark of hope about the human reached her, just as she was about to slip into unconsciousness. He knelt down beside her, his gloved hands gently lifting her head from the snow. His eyes were filled with concern, but there was something else there. Something softer, something warm. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his voice rough from the cold, but still kind. "Stay with me, all right?" Aria's mind was too foggy to process his words fully. She tried to speak, to explain that she was beyond saving, but no sound came from her lips. She could barely keep her eyes open. All she could feel was the warmth of his hands against her frozen skin. It was strange. It was unlike anything she had ever felt before. The human didn't hesitate. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her to protect her from the cold. Despite the harsh winds and the snow that threatened to bury them, he held on tightly, his body pressing against hers. It wasn't just physical warmth that she felt. It was something deeper, something emotional. She didn't know why this human cared for her, but in that moment, she didn't feel so alone. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she felt the warmth of another being. She could feel the slow, steady thrum of his heartbeat against her own, and it gave her something she hadn't felt in so long. Hope. The human spoke again. Oh, his words were soft and filled with a gentle urgency. "We're going to get you out of here. You're going to be all right. I promise." Aria wanted to believe him, but the cold had a tight grip on her, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to survive it. Still, there was something about this human, something about his unwavering determination, that made her want to fight. She took a shallow breath and nodded, though it was barely noticeable. She didn't know if she would make it. She didn't know if she could trust this strange human who had come out of nowhere to save her. But for the first time in years, she had something to hold on to. She wasn't alone anymore. The human gently lifted her into his arms and started walking, the snow crunching beneath his boots. With each step, Aria felt the weight of the cold, beginning to lift, if only a little. She couldn't see the world around her anymore. Her eyes were heavy, but she felt the warmth of his body close to hers. And that was enough for now, that in the vast emptiness of the frozen wasteland, something had changed. A small light had sparked in the darkness. And for the first time in a long time, Aria allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still hope for her after all. Asterisk. The unexpected rescuer. The wind howled as the human carried Aria through the endless white desert. Each step was a struggle, but his resolve never wavered. His name was Adam, and though he had spent most of his life in isolation on this cold, forgotten planet, he had always believed there was more to life than the harshness of survival. He had been assigned here by his government to keep watch over the planet's icy terrain, but the work had never truly felt important. Until now, he couldn't understand why this alien girl had been left behind. Her kind was known to be fierce and relentless, yet here she was, helpless and on the verge of death. Something about her delicate features, her fur, and the faint marks of battle touched a deep part of him. He couldn't leave her to die. As he trudged through the snow, he couldn't help but wonder if he was making a mistake. Helping her meant defying the very people who had sent him here. Humanity had been at war with her kind for years, but in that moment, none of that mattered. All he saw was a living being in need of help. His shelter was a few miles away, but it felt like an eternity. The cold seeped through his thick coat, making his muscles ache with exhaustion. His breath came in sharp, painful bursts, but he pushed on. Aria was heavy in his arms, her body frail and weak, but he couldn't give up. He had to save her. When they finally reached the shelter, Adam carefully laid her down on a cot in the corner of the small, dimly lit room. The walls were lined with survival equipment, and a small, portable heater buzzed softly in the corner. He quickly set about starting a fire, his hands trembling as he tried to light the dry kindling. Aria stirred slightly as he worked, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, she just stared at the ceiling, her mind sluggish and confused. The warmth that surrounded her was unlike anything she had ever known. The cold of the outside world had been all she had ever known, but this felt like a miracle. It made her wonder if she was dreaming. "You're safe," Adam said quietly, his voice steady despite the growing tension inside him. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe here." Aria slowly turned her head, her eyes meeting his. She didn't speak, she couldn't, but there was something in her gaze that spoke volumes. Fear, confusion, curiosity. She had never trusted humans. The stories her people told painted them as heartless monsters, destroyers of worlds. But this human, he didn't seem like the enemy. She wanted to ask why he had helped her, why he hadn't left her to die like the others would have. But the words wouldn't come. Her throat was dry, her body still weak from the cold. Adam didn't push her to speak. He simply sat beside her, offering her a small bottle of water. She hesitated for a moment, unsure whether she should accept, but the thirst was overwhelming. Slowly, she took it from him, drinking in small, careful sips. The warmth of the water filled her stomach, and with it, a sense of peace she had never known. "I know you're probably scared," Adam said, breaking the silence. "But I'm here, too. Help you. Whatever happened, whatever you've been through, it's not over. You're not alone anymore." Aria didn't know how to respond. She didn't know how to feel. Her mind was still clouded with the fog of desperation, and the warmth surrounding her was almost too much to handle. It was a strange feeling comfort, something she had never been given. She could barely understand what was happening. All she knew was that she wasn't dying anymore. She wasn't alone. As the fire crackled in the corner, Adam glanced out the small window, his gaze distant. You're the first of your kind I've ever met up close. I've heard stories, of course, but I never thought I'd actually encounter someone like you. I don't know what this means for either of us, but I'm not letting you die out there. Aria's thoughts were a tangled mess. The war between their kinds had been brutal. Her people saw humans as weak, inferior beings. To them, she was a soldier, a weapon no different from the others. Yet here, in the warmth of this shelter, she felt like something else. She felt human. She couldn't explain it. She closed her eyes, letting the silence of the room settle. Around them, there was no more fighting, no more war. Just her and this strange human who had saved her life. She didn't know what to expect from this human, but she was beginning to feel something she never thought possible. Hope. Adam, sensing her growing calm, let out a quiet breath. I'll be here. We'll figure things out. Together. The words were simple, but in the quiet of the shelter, they held more meaning than anything else he could say. He didn't know what the future would bring. He didn't know what kind of bond could form between a human and an alien. But he knew one thing. For sure he wasn't going to let her down. As the night settled in and the fire warmed the room, the two of them sat in silence, a strange understanding beginning to form between them. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, neither felt quite as alone as before. The first warmth. The night was quiet, but the tension between them simmered beneath the surface. Aria lay on the cot, her body finally beginning to relax, though her mind was still clouded with confusion. She had been fighting for so long, fighting to survive, fighting against everything that wanted to see her fall. But now here, in this small, warm room, she found herself questioning everything she had been taught about humans. Adam sat nearby, his back against the wall, watching her with careful eyes. He wasn't sure what to say or what to do next. Everything about this situation was foreign to him. He had always seen his job as just another mission, a way to stay out of trouble. But now, with Aria in his shelter, everything had changed. She wasn't an enemy, but could he trust her? And even more, could she trust him? The silence stretched on until Adam finally broke it. Are you feeling better? He asked gently, not wanting to push her, but also desperate for some sign that she was improving. Aria blinked slowly, her pale eyes looking up at him. She didn't respond immediately. She had no words to explain what she was feeling. Was it gratitude? Fear? A mix of both? All she knew was that her body no longer felt as if it were freezing to death, and for that she owed him something. She wanted to thank him, but her voice felt like a distant thing. Instead, she nodded weakly, her body still too tired to move much. The warmth from the fire and from the blankets that Adam had carefully placed around her was a strange comfort. She had never felt anything like this before. In her world, warmth was a luxury one she had never experienced in her years of life. Adam's eyes softened as he watched her. He stood up and moved toward the small stove in the corner. I'll make some food. It's not much, but you need to eat something. Aria didn't protest. She didn't have the strength to. Her senses were still adjusting to this new reality, this strange kindness that felt like a foreign concept. She had grown up believing that trust was a weakness, that it only led to betrayal. Her people never showed kindness, and certainly not to the humans they saw as enemies. But Adam's actions, his warmth, his care were different. There was no cruelty in him. As Adam cooked, the soft smell of something warm and edible filled the small room. Aria's stomach growled But she still felt hesitant. She wasn't used to feeling this way. She wasn't used to needing anyone. But as the human turned and placed a steaming bowl of food on the table next to her, she couldn't deny that the hunger inside her had become overwhelming. She reached out slowly, her hands trembling as they grasped the bowl. She took a tentative sip, and the warmth of the food spread through her chest, easing some of the emptiness that had taken root there. "This is good," she said, her voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. She wasn't sure if Adam could even hear her, but the words slipped out anyway. The sound of her own voice surprised her. She hadn't spoken in days. Adam looked up, a small knowing smile tugging at his lips. "I'm glad you like it." Arya stared down at the bowl for a moment, lost in thought. She had been raised to distrust humans, to see them as little more than obstacles. But here, with Adam, it was different. She had never met a human who would offer her warmth, let alone food, without expecting something in return. She didn't know how to handle this shift, this strange sense of peace she felt in his presence. I didn't think anyone would help me," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Her words felt like a confession, a crack in the cold wall she had built around herself. Adam's expression softened, but there was something else in his eyes, to curiosity, understanding. He took a step closer to her, but didn't crowd her. "You weren't supposed to be left here," he said quietly. "No one should be left to die alone in the cold. I couldn't just leave you." Arya's gaze lifted to meet his. There was a softness in his voice that she hadn't expected. He was speaking from the heart, and something about that made her chest tighten. Was it possible that humans could be kind after all? She finished the last of the food, her strength slowly returning. She still didn't trust her own emotions. But one thing was clear. Adam wasn't like the others. There was no malice in his eyes, no suspicion or hatred. He was offering her something simple, something human, kindness. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little stronger now. I don't know what to say. I've never been treated like this before." Adam shrugged, a humble gesture that seemed to imply he didn't expect anything in return. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted to help." For the first time in her life, Arya felt something she had never felt before. A desire to trust, a longing to believe that there might be more to life than pain and survival. She had been taught to fight for everything, to never rely on anyone. But here she was, depending on a human for the first time. Her mind was still a whirl of confusion, but one thing was certain. This human Adam was different. And though she didn't know what this meant for her future, she knew she would never forget this moment. The fire crackled softly in the corner of the room, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Arya sat, back in the cot, the warmth of the shelter surrounding her. She wasn't sure what would come next, but for the first time, she wasn't scared of the unknown. With Adam by her side, maybe, just maybe, there was hope for something more. Asterisk breaking. Barriers the morning light streamed through the small, foggy window, casting a soft glow over the room. Arya woke to the sound of quiet movement. Adam was already up, kneeling in front of the fire, adding more fuel to keep the warmth alive. She sat up slowly, still feeling the weight of the blankets that had cocooned her through the night. It was a strange, comforting feeling, one she had never known. As her senses sharpened, she noticed something new. The air smelled fresh, not like the stale, metallic odor of battlefields and starships. This place, this shelter, felt like a refuge. And for the first time, Arya realized that it wasn't just the shelter or the food that was keeping her alive. It was the strange, unspoken connection that was starting to form between her and Adam. She had always viewed herself as a soldier, raised to believe that emotions were weakness. But here, in this humble space, she found herself questioning everything she had been taught. She didn't need to fight. Not anymore. Adam, sensing her awakening, turned from the fire and met her gaze. Morning, he said softly, as if speaking louder might break the fragile peace that hung in the air. Aria nodded, her mind still cloudy but slowly clearing. She had a million questions, but she didn't know where to start. Her past, her mission, her people, they all seemed like distant memories now. Her world was shifting, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. You're probably wondering why I helped you, Adam continued, his voice gentle but direct. He sat across from her, resting on the edge of the small table. I could have left you out there. It would have been easier that way, but I couldn't do it. Aria met his eyes, and for the first time, she saw no fear, no hesitation, just quiet determination. Why? She whispered, the single word carrying a weight of its own. Adam paused, considering his answer carefully. Because everyone deserves a chance, no matter who they are. You were just someone in need. I couldn't just walk away. Her chest tightened as she absorbed his words. She had never heard anything like this before. In her world, survival was everything. Empathy, kindness were seen as weaknesses to be exploited, not traits to be admired. And yet, here was a human, offering her not just food or shelter, but a chance to be more than just a weapon, more than just a soldier. Aria looked down at her hands, the fur on her fingers still matted with snow from when Adam had first found her. She had always been taught to view humans as the enemy, as inferior. But now, she realized that what she had been taught might not be the full truth. There was more to this human, and perhaps to her, than either of them understood. I've never had anyone look at me like that, she murmured, the vulnerability in her voice surprising her. Adam looked at her with kindness in his eyes. Everyone has their own story, Aria. I'm sure yours is complicated, but you don't have to fight anymore. Not here. For the first time, Aria felt the truth in his words. She had been running, hiding, fighting for so long that she had forgotten what it meant to just exist, to just be. The tension that had gripped her for years began to ease, and she allowed herself to relax, just for a moment, but the peace didn't last long. A sudden noise, a distant rumble, shattered the calm. Aria's ears pricked up. The ground trembled slightly, and a low mechanical hum vibrated through the walls of the shelter. Adam's face changed in an instant. Stay here, he said quickly, standing up and grabbing a weapon from a nearby shelf. We need to move fast. Something's coming. Aria's heart pounded in her chest as she sprang to her feet. She didn't know what was happening, but her instincts kicked in. She was a soldier, and soldiers didn't wait for others to make decisions. What's going on? She asked. Her voice sharped out. Adam didn't answer right away. He glanced toward the window, eyes narrowed. It's a search team. They've likely been sent to find you. We have to move, Aria. They won't stop until they find you. Aria's blood ran cold. She had known this moment would come eventually. Her people, the Volcari, didn't leave their own behind, especially not when they knew a soldier was still alive. The thought of facing her own kind again filled her with a mix of fear and anger. She had been taught to hate humanity, to see them as enemies. But now, with Adam at her side, she wasn't sure where her loyalties lay anymore. I'm not going back, she said firmly, her voice steady. I won't let them take me. Adam's gaze softened, but his resolve didn't waver. You don't have to go back. You're not alone anymore. There was no time for further discussion. The hum outside grew louder, and the ground beneath their feet shook again. Adam grabbed a pack of supplies, tossing it to Aria. We need to get out of here, now. Without hesitation, Aria took the pack, slinging it over her shoulder. They moved quickly through the small shelter, gathering what they needed. The sound of the approaching search team grew closer, and with each passing second, the tension in the air thickened. Aria's heart raced as they slipped out of the shelter and into the icy landscape. The wind whipped around them, but it was nothing compared to the storm that was coming their way. As the first signs of pursuit appeared on the horizon, she turned to Adam, her eyes fierce. "Where do we go now?" Adam didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed toward the distant mountains. "We go north. There's a place where they won't be able to find us. It's a long way, but it's our only chance." Aria nodded, the icy wind biting at her skin as they began to run. The cold didn't matter anymore. It was nothing compared to the storm they were about to face. A shared purpose. The wind howled against them as they trudged through the deep snow. Every step felt like a battle, each one sinking them deeper into the cold, unforgiving landscape. Adam moved with determination, but even his strong legs were beginning to tire. The wind cut through his clothes, biting at his exposed skin, and the freezing temperatures made it difficult to breathe. Yet he kept moving. He had no choice. Beside him, Aria struggled to keep up, her feet faltering in the snow. Her body was still recovering from the cold, but there was something else weighing on her mind. The search team was out there somewhere, behind them, closing in with every passing minute. She couldn't allow herself to think about what they might do if they caught her. She couldn't let Adam face them. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, her voice raw from the wind. "You shouldn't be out here with me. This isn't your fight." Adam glanced at her, his expression unwavering. "It's my fight now," he said simply. "You're not alone. Not anymore." The words rang in her ears, and something inside her shifted. She had never had anyone fight for her, never had anyone look at her like this, with such understanding. He didn't see her as just an alien, an enemy, or a soldier. He saw her as a person, as someone worth saving. For the first time, Aria felt a spark of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before hope. But it was fragile, like a flickering light in the darkness, and she wasn't sure how long it would last. The search team was getting closer. She could feel their presence in the air, their relentless pursuit drawing nearer. Adam turned his focus ahead, scanning the horizon. The mountains were still a long way off, their towering peaks barely visible through the dense snowstorm. They needed to get there, but the journey was taking everything out of them. Every muscle in Adam's body screamed in protest, every breath harder to take in the thin, freezing air. But he didn't slow down, not for a second. Aria, on the other hand, felt the exhaustion setting in more quickly. She had never been trained to run for miles in this kind of terrain, and though her people were built for survival, this cold was unlike anything she had ever known. Her body was still weak from the exposure to the elements, but she pushed through. For Adam, for the chance at a future she'd never dared dream of. "Just a little further," Adam muttered to himself, more to push himself forward than anything else. Aria didn't respond. She didn't need to. She could see it in his eyes, the same determination she had once seen in herself. Back when she still believed in fighting for her people. Back when she still believed in fighting. But now, with Adam beside her, something had changed. She didn't want to fight anymore. She didn't want to run, to hide. She wanted to make a stand together, not against each other. The sound of engines rumbled in the distance, a sound that made her heart skip a beat. They were getting closer. The search team had found their trail. Adam stopped in his tracks, his eyes scanning the terrain. His heart pounded in his chest. He knew they were close, too close. His gaze met Aria's, and in that moment, without words, they both understood. "We don't have much time," he said, his voice barely audible over the wind. "We need to split up. Lead them in the wrong direction." Aria's stomach tightened. "You're not serious." "They'll find you. They're already close." Adam replied, his jaw set with a grim resolve. "But I won't let them take you. I'll give you enough time to get to the mountains. Go now." Arya hesitated. She didn't want to leave him behind, not like this. But the urgency in his voice was undeniable. She was the priority now. He had made his decision, and she had to make hers. With a final reluctant glance at Adam, she turned and sprinted toward the jagged peaks in the distance. She pushed herself. Harder, faster, the cold biting at her skin, her heart racing with every step. She could hear the engines now, much closer. She couldn't afford to look back. She had to trust Adam to keep them away. Behind her, Adam stood tall, his back straight against the wind. He knew what he had to do. His eyes narrowed, focused on the search team that was closing in. They wouldn't get to her. Not while he was still breathing. The rumble of the engines grew louder, and then they were there at the edge of the tree line. Adam could see the figures moving, silhouettes against the white snowstorm. They were closing in, moving with military precision, but he had the advantage. He disappeared into the shadows of a nearby outcrop, his steps light as he silently moved. Around the searchers. He'd been trained for this. He could move faster than they could track him, and he wouldn't stop until he had bought Arya enough time to escape. As he darted from cover to cover, the search team spread out, their voices crackling through the comms. They had no idea where he had gone. Adam had set the stage perfectly. With each move, he threw them off his trail, leading them in the wrong direction, further and further from Arya. Arya didn't know how much time had passed, but when she reached the base of the mountains, she finally allowed herself to stop. She collapsed against a rock, gasping for breath, the cold air biting at her lungs. She turned to look back toward the flat plains, her heart still pounding. Was Adam okay? Had he managed to fool them? She couldn't know. Not yet. But for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the hope that had been building inside her, the belief that maybe, just maybe, she could live. They could live. And together, they would find a way forward. The sound of the engines faded into the distance, and for the first time in a long time, Arya felt a quiet peace settle over her. She was safe, at least for now. And as she looked up at the towering peaks before her, she knew that her journey was far from over. But she wasn't alone anymore, not with Adam by her side. The true warmth Arya stood at the foot of the mountain range, her chest heaving with exhaustion. The cold air bit at her skin, and her legs trembled with fatigue. She glanced back one last time, her eyes scanning the horizon, but there was no sign of Adam. The wind whipped through the snow, carrying with it the distant sounds of the search team, still looking for her, but she knew they were no longer a threat. She had escaped, but had Adam? She shook her head, pushing the thought away. She couldn't afford to dwell on it, not when there was still so much ahead of her. The mountains loomed tall, their jagged peaks disappearing into the swirling snowstorm. They were her only chance now, her chance to find safety, to find the future Adam had given her hope for. Arya took a deep breath, the icy air filling her lungs, and began her climb. The journey was grueling. Her body was weak, the cold still seeping into her bones, but she had learned something in the past few days, something she had never known about herself. She could endure. She could survive. And for the first time in her life, she didn't have to do it alone. The climb was slow, and the storm grew harsher as she ascended. The wind howled around her, biting at her exposed skin, but she pressed on. She kept telling herself that this was where she would find freedom, where she would find a new life, one that wasn't defined by war, survival, or betrayal. A life where she could be more than just a soldier. A life where she could choose her own destiny. Hours passed, and the storm showed no sign of letting up. Arya's vision blurred, and her steps became heavier with each passing minute. The weight of her journey, the physical and emotional toll, was beginning to catch up with her. She paused. For a moment, leaning against the jagged rocks of the mountain, trying to steady herself. Her body was screaming at her to stop, to rest, but her mind wouldn't allow it. She couldn't stop, not yet. Suddenly, a noise caught her attention. A faint crunching of snow, the sound of someone moving toward her. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. Was it the search team? Had they found her after all? Her hand instinctively reached for the weapon she carried, but as the figure emerged from the swirling snow, her breath caught in her throat. It was Adam. He stood there, covered in snow, his face pale from exhaustion, but his eyes burning with determination. He didn't look back at the shelter. He didn't hesitate. He had come for her. "Aria," he said, his voice raspy but strong, "you made it." "I knew you would." Tears stung her eyes as she stared at him, unable to speak for a moment. She had thought she would never see him again. The fear, the doubt, everything she had been carrying felt so heavy in that moment. But now, with him standing before her, it all melted away. He hadn't just saved her from the cold. He had saved her from the loneliness that had consumed her for so long. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice trembling. "Why did you come? You could have gone the other way. You could have saved yourself." Adam shook his head, stepping closer to her. "Because I promised you, didn't I? I told you you wouldn't be alone. I couldn't leave you behind. Not when we're this close." Aria's chest tightened as she took in his words. She had spent so many years fighting, building walls around herself to protect her heart. She had learned to survive on her own, to depend on no one but herself. But Adam, he had broken through all of that without even trying. He had shown her a side of humanity that she had never known existed. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "I don't know how to repay you. I never thought I'd meet someone like you. I never thought I'd find this ... She trailed off, not knowing how to explain. The warmth she felt, not just from the fire of the shelter, but from the way he had treated her like she mattered. Adam smiled, his face lighting up with a quiet but sincere warmth. "You don't have to repay me, Aria. Just don't forget that you have someone who believes in you. That's enough for me." For the first time in years, Aria felt something she had long abandoned: hope. Not the cold, distant hope that she had once held on to in battle, but something real, something grounded, something she had never known she needed. Together, they turned back toward the mountains. The storm raged on, but with each step, the weight of the world seemed to lessen. Aria wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she was no longer afraid of it. She was no longer afraid of the unknown. And as they climbed higher, Aria realized that her journey wasn't just about survival anymore. It wasn't just about fighting. It was about finding something worth fighting for. And with Adam by her side, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Asterisk.